What's up, guys? So if you follow along with my videos or if you've listened to my podcast, you might know I spend a lot of time discussing some of the drama within the tech industry, but I also try to provide some feedback or some advice for people within the industry that I think can help them and help their careers. So it was nice to hear from somebody who watches my YouTube videos, listens to my podcast, tell me that they recently got their first ever web development job. He sends me a message saying, "Hey, I've been busy with interviews, going to start going through the book this week. I finally got a new job." He says, "Yeah, I got a job as a React developer. Literally doubled my pay too. Thanks for all your advice. It's helped a ton." And then in another message, he told me that my video about negotiating salary probably got him an extra $10,000 on his salary. Obviously, most people would be pretty happy doubling their salary, let alone attributing $10,000 of that doubling your salary to just negotiation alone. So I asked him for some feedback, specifically some advice that I gave him that he found to be most valuable. So I want to cover some of those in depth so that maybe it can help some of you as well. I'll say up front, I think most of the advice that I'm going to give is targeted primarily to beginners, people who don't have much work experience and are trying to get into the industry, or people who just might have one job and are struggling to get that next job. So most of the advice I gave him revolved almost entirely around his portfolio. He didn't think it was really selling himself that well. He didn't think it was, catching the attention of hiring managers. The first piece of advice I gave him was your portfolio is literally whatever you want it to be. There's no tech rule book you have to follow. If you want it in your portfolio because you think it shows off a skill set, put it in your portfolio. This is, I think, one of the big issues a lot of people have with their portfolio in general. They're too scared to put stuff on it. They think there's stuff that's too small and it isn't really worthy of being in their portfolio. And this is actually something he said himself. After I provided him some examples of things that could be on his portfolio, he says, "Shit, I have a bunch of stuff this small. Is this portfolio worthy stuff?" He says, "I think I may have really built up an image of a professional developer that is way higher than the actual barrier to entry." The thing is, when it comes to your portfolio, if it isn't worthwhile to the employer, then it just isn't. So it's better to have something on there that they don't find worthwhile than to not include something that they might find worthwhile. When hiring managers are looking through resumes, they're skimming through. They don't have time to check every single project, pull it up on a web page. They're just looking through your resume, looking for keywords that are interesting enough for them to take a second look. So the most important thing if you're trying to grab their attention is to have projects with specific tech keywords that are going to catch their eye and make them want to take a second look. So on this point, I told him don't think big or small in terms of projects. Think about demonstrating an ability, knowledge of a framework, showing off that you can consume an API, animation if that's your thing. It's about showing off skill sets, especially if you don't have a job history to back it up. One example of this would be a Slack app that I wrote for Slack that honestly isn't that impressive. Like, it doesn't do some mind-blowing AI machine learning thing, but it still has a lot of things that can sell you or at least catch the eyes of hiring managers. So here's the Slack app. It's pretty basic. All it does is allows you to use a slash command, you give it an emoji, and then it goes to Giphy and it gives an associated GIF with that. So on a surface level, something like this might seem pretty basic, but think of all the various things that are combined to create something like this that you can put on a resume that can actually capture the eyes of the hiring manager. First, there's the API, which is actually used to power this thing. I use Node.js for this, so right there you get to put Node.js on your resume. Then there's integrating with Slack, doing this add to Slack button. So now you get to say that you've integrated with Slack. Then you're using Giphy to actually get these images. There's another integration, Giphy. Then you deploy this API so that other people can use it. There's a Heroku integration. Then you actually have to work through the documentation on Slack and you run into issues. In my case, I actually even had to contact Slack because their API documentation wasn't clear enough. I had some questions. So that's another process you can talk through if you actually get to a phone interview or an in-person interview. Then there's the actual website to create this app. And then there's all the design that you can do. I mean, if you're trying to get into design or if you just want another thing on your resume, you can design this website yourself. In this case, I made this not very creative logo. I actually made this GIF myself, but then you get to do stuff like this. And then along with the website itself, to actually create this, if you want yet another thing on your resume, you can use a specific framework to create this. So I think for this, I use AngularJS, but if I were to do this now, I would probably use something like Vue.js just to have another framework on my resume. And then to be honest, something like this actually gets a lot more complicated pretty quick because once again, you're integrating with a lot of things. You're bound to run into issues, which are just more talking points when you're in an interview. But then you get to actually have something deployable, something, out in the wild that other people can use. So you get to go through this whole process, integrating with Slack's OAuth, authorizing it for your app, and then once you receive the correct response, you can hopefully redirect to a thank you page. There you go. And, work through that whole process. Another thing I told him was to take an honest look at your resume and your portfolio and ask yourself, would I hire this person? If the answer is no, make something to make yourself more hireable. Most companies want some sort of proof that you know how to code. If you don't have anything that proves it, make something that proves it. Find someone out there who has a cool project that you like that's easy enough that it won't take you months to make, and then make it. Don't worry about copying other people. It's just a basic side project. It's just a small thing to demonstrate your ability to code. If you follow people on Twitter or if there are people out there who make cool stuff, go to their website, find something they've made, and then make it. And there's always websites out there that can help you come up with ideas. If you don't know specific people that have made stuff, there's this website, enlight.nyc. Learn to code by building projects, and they even have them broken up by intermediate, advanced, beginner. So they have basic stuff like a guessing number game, hex code or a hex color generator, text editors. They have all kinds of projects that you can just make here. And again, it gives you something that you can put on your resume, put on your portfolio. You have something that you can actually talk through. And then there's this website made by Jennifer DeWalt, where she literally made 180 websites in 180 days. So if you're looking for an idea, here's 180 of them. So just go through this, find something that looks semi-interesting, and then just try and make your own version of it. So in this case, you put in a hex color, hit submit, then you have these different values you can do. Let's do a percentage here. So the ideas are out there. There's plenty of examples of projects you can make to put on your portfolio, and don't hesitate to copy some of these ideas. Because again, you're just copying the idea, but then you're actually making the code, which is what the hiring manager cares about, which is what the people who are trying to find a new developer, that's what they care about, your ability to write code. So even if you take somebody else's idea, as long as you can prove that you didn't copy their code and you wrote it all from scratch, that's all they care about. When it comes to your portfolio, just put everything on there. It's not going to hurt you to have the small stuff on there. Even something like the Slack app, which on a surface level might just seem like a Slack app, had way more than that. I have talking points like Node.js, Slack integration, Jiffy integration, Heroku, AngularJS for the website, Sketch, which I use for design, Photoshop, which I use for design. That stuff adds up, and those are talking points. In an interview, you get to stretch that out and tell that story, make it as long as you want to show how much you learned, all the roadblocks you hit, the problems you encountered. That makes you valuable, that makes you seem like you have the ability to learn on your own, and that's what's really important when you're trying to get hired.